Hi, my name's David Beebe, welcome to the channel. I thought I would kick things off with a little legato lick. This is a mini lesson and a breakdown of a line of my own that I transcribed out of an improvised jam video. This is on John Cordy's Ain't No Body challenge, and it's the line lick you heard me playing at the very start of the video, but I will cut in the original improvised line here. So we'll break it down, I'll show you how to play it, and I'll also give you some tips and pointers of how you can tackle this kind of thing more generally. Or should I say how I tackle these kind of things more generally. John Cordy and I were talking about this particular lick, as he'd also transcribed it and done a video lesson on it, and actually built a really cool exercise out of it, so I will link his video down in the description below. But for now, I will rejig the cameras, get some close-ups, and take you through the lick. Okay, so the first thing to say is that the line, as I'm going to teach it to you now, and as you heard it in the beginning of the video, is not exactly the same as the line that I improvised in the original video. The reason for this is that I don't actually nail my intention or what I think I intended in the improvised video. You can hear that I'm going for this continuous 16th note triplet idea. So a da-ka-da, 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 da-ka-da. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So fitting 6 notes into one beat. But as I transcribe it, you don't actually hear that fully throughout. Towards the end, on like the last beat of the second bar, say, there may be like a septuplet or a quintuplet or something, and that wasn't intentional. So it's not worth me actually transcribing that. It's far better for me to engineer something that I would have perhaps wanted to come out and to work on that as an exercise. So we're going to break this 2-bar lick down into little chunks, or 8 little chunks. And we're going to work on 6 notes plus 1 at a time. So a whole beat, and we're going to learn a whole beat and then land on the first note of the next beat and then sort of piece it together like this. Okay, so the lick is in E natural minor, or G major if you want to think relative major. And let's kick off by looking at that first beat. So this is the 6 notes plus 1. 6 notes of the first beat plus the first note of the second beat. And slowly it goes like this. So I'm starting with my middle finger on E7, hammering onto E8, pulling off back to E7, pulling off to E5, and then hammering back onto E7, hammering onto E8. Those are the 6, so those are the 6 notes, and then I'm finishing on the A7. So you just want to get that under your fingers, and really importantly, be feeling that as a group of 6 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then this is the 1 again of the next beat. This in itself is a really good exercise to start getting some finger independence between these 2 middle fingers here, so the middle and then the ring finger. This is quite an awkward movement to do, but it's a really useful one, certainly for phrasing longer, stretchier legato things, because if you can phrase between finger 2 and 3, then you've also got your little finger at your disposal to stretch up even further. So it's good practice to start developing into coordination dependence between these 2 middle fingers. Well, all your fingers, but these ones are particularly tricky. So here we have it again. And let's pick up onto that second beat now. So we're going to start where we left off. So this is on A7. So we're not playing this note twice. We're just now, for the sake of learning and practicing this, we're now picking up off of this, the last note we played in the previous grouping of notes. So now I'm going to play A7, change to the D string. So now I've got D5. And then I'm going to hammer on to D7, hammer on to D9, compress my index finger in, and then play G7. Then expand my third finger out and play D9. Then come down with my little finger to A10. And that A10 is the first note of beat 3. So that a little bit more cohesively would go. Putting those together, I would get. So let's pick it up into beat 3. Again, we're going to start on that first note of beat 3 where we left off in the previous groupings. So it's going to sound slowly like this. Starting with my little finger there on that A10, pulling off to A7, hammering on to A9, hammering on to A10. Now I've changed fingerings here, so I started this beat with my pinky finger on A10, pulled off to my index, hammered onto my middle, and now instead of going back to the pinky finger, it's another sort of expansion here, and so now I'm going on to the ring finger there on A10. Okay, so beat 4 is where things start getting trickier. It's certainly the bit that I find most challenging and have to work on. And I actually play this in a few different ways, and I'm going to show you both of them here. The first way is with a little bit of a slide. This is a semitone chromatic slide that I'm not sure if is a good idea or not. I tend to do it a lot in my playing. I don't know whether it's particularly the most controlled thing or not, but I think I did this on the original improvisation video. So here's where I'm going to be going off of beat 4 with my pinky finger. It's going to go like this. There's a few tricky things about this. First of all, we have this slide, this controlled slide here with just the pinky finger. That itself is going to be tricky at speed. But then we have to sort of compress in and then roll across the B and E string here. So with the index finger. So I'm going from G11, slide into G12, and I compress in to B10, and then roll down to E10. Okay, and then those last couple of notes. So I've got, so then I hammer on up to E15, pull back off to E10, and then E14. Okay, and that's with my, so the E15 is with the pinky finger, and E14 is with the ring finger, the finger 3 there. Now, this is tricky. So, as you hopefully will have noticed throughout this, I've got quite a classical hand position here, and this helps for this kind of legato playing, I find, to have the thumb planted firmly in the middle of the back of the neck, pointing upwards. Now, as you come into doing this slide here, it's going to be tempting for the thumb to sort of go like this. So from, I can't show you behind the neck right now, but if I do the last sort of hammer on up to the G11, now, this slide here, imagine the thumb is going to sort of go like this. And that, it's not great, because then it's going to leave you with less control to be able to get on up to the, you're going to be sort of like this. Your thumb's going to be pointing that way, and you're going to be hammering on with the little finger like that. I always try to aim to maintain this kind of hand posture where the thumb is like behind the fingers. And the hand just sort of slides in this kind of motion. So this is tricky, and this is partly why I think the sliding, this little semitone slide, might not be such a good idea. But if you control it and you concentrate, it is possible. So I can go, and then the thumb slides with the hand. And then it supports this next movement here. Okay. Okay, and then this E14 is the first note of the next beat. Now, the other way I recommend you practice and play this and learn this part of the phrase is with a wider stretched hammer-on. So if we come into this beat, so going back into beat 4, but instead of hammering on from the flat 7 to the 9 with the pinky finger, so going on to beat 1 with the pinky finger. If we go on with a wider stretch, and this might be tricky for some of you, but I've got small hands and I can manage it. If I go from the flat 7 and hammer on to the 9 with my third finger, this now allows me to compress in. So this is a big expansion, and then hammer on to the pinky instead of sliding. And that's more of a controlled motion and a slightly smoother motion, I think, overall. It's just that I've kind of got into the habit over the years of doing these sort of chromatic semitone slides. A little bit of a bad habit, I think, but I can keep it under control with some concentration. But this way of doing it, so stretching up with a bigger stretch, is probably more controlled overall. If you want to build that into your muscle memory as opposed to the slides, it might be a good idea. So the next 6 notes are also pretty tricky. It's another grey area as to how best to play them. I don't think I play it the same way each time, so I'll show you again a couple of different ways of doing this in the right hand. But slowly it goes like this. And the tricky thing here is that I think on the original improvisation in the video, I was doing hammer-ons from nowhere for the string changes. So what I've got is E14 with the third finger, hammering on to E15, pulling off to E14, pulling off to E10. Now hammer from nowhere onto the B string onto B15. And that creates this little fake doubling effect that also is pretty tricky because you're kind of doubling the same note twice. I actually picked it there, and that's the other way we're going to look at doing it in a second. But yeah, initially hammer-ons from nowhere. So then I've got pulling off from B15 to B10, and then hammering on to the next first note of the next beat with the third finger on B13. Okay, so the other way that you can do this is with picking it. So I'll probably cut this in here in the right hand with the right hand camera. So here I'm going to go, and then I'm picking the B string there. Notice the pick's already resting on the string as well. I'm not going to go into detail about the right hand, as I said before. If you pay attention and zoom in close on the on that right hand camera angle, then you should be able to sort of follow along. I'll also annotate it in the PDF file. But a lot of this stuff here is about planning and preparing things. So when I do this beat, I'm going, and the pick's already on the string, on the B string resting there. And then, now for this next bit, then you can either do that again as a hammer on, and as we go into the next beat, again, continue hammer-ons from nowhere or pick them. It's up to you. I don't do this the same way every time. So the next 6 notes, this is where things start to get a little easier. This is the downhill approach now towards the end, literally, because we're coming down in pitch on the fretboard as well. And slowly it goes like this. Frets here we've got, so B13, and then pulling off to B10. Now here you can either hammer from nowhere onto G11 or pick it, it's up to you. Hammering onto G12, back to B10, G11, and then D12. Again, the hammer-ons from nowhere, the picking on this is one of the things with just changes depending on how I'm feeling or how tired my hands are, or I don't know, it's probably a million factors. I've not really thought about those choices too much. I've just noticed that I do it different ways. I don't think either is better or worse. Maybe it's a good thing to practice both of them. In fact, actually the fingering's a little bit different there because I think it needs to go... Yeah, in fact, that's something I missed out. So this is another kind of all about planning and preparation, sort of, not planning as in it's all planned out, but sort of subconsciously my fingers and muscle memory is sort of planning its route through these sorts of things. So what's going to happen there in order to facilitate the next beat, the next grouping of 6 notes, is that I'm pulling off from my third finger to the index, and then I've got my middle finger to third finger on the G string, then the index finger on the B, and then the middle finger on the G. But now I'm going to compress in and do the little finger on the D note there on the D12. That's going to allow me to stretch back, expand back out for the next 6 notes. Okay, so we've now only got 2 beats left, really. So the next 6 notes, it's going to go like this. Very similar, we're kind of repeating this motif really from the last 6 notes. So I've got here the D12, pulling off to D9, and hammering on to D10, and then hammering back onto D12, G9, D10, and then A12. And that just kicks off another motif now. So for the last 6 notes, which is the same thing again. So now going from A12 to A9, A10, A12, D9, A10, and then we finish the very last note on this E12 here. And that's the first note of the next bar. put that all together coming from this sort of trickier sliding part. I'll do it with the hammer on instead. Let me do that with the metronome, and then we'll put it to the beat, and then we'll get into the next section of the lesson. Okay, so those are all the notes and the fingerings and the groupings, and we're going to talk about how to practice this and things to look out for and little tips and things in just a moment. But I just want to play it now through for you with the drum beat. It's really important to get this under your fingers. Make sure you're feeling these in groups of 6s plus 1. Do it in each little chunk and sort of like build it together. I really advise against just trying to blaze through this as fast as you can and just learning it all in one go. We're going to go into sort of like a practice session in just a moment where I'm going to show you how I would practice this with the drum beat and sort of build it up. But yeah, it's really important to get this under your fingers, get the notes, and get the sort of the physicality of it and the subdivision feeling good. Okay, so assuming you've got the technique under your fingers and all the muscle mechanics are in place, which is not something I'm teaching here, of course, what I wanted to do is to give you a way of putting this all together and practice it in a cohesive manner that's going to give you lots of control and lots of flexibility for applying this into other areas of your playing. So what we really want to do is be feeling these 16th note triplets as tightly and as properly as we can. So the first thing is to find a drum beat or preferably a drum beat at a tempo that's comfortable, and then halve the subdivision. So instead of doing this as 16th note triplets, do it as we've been learning so far by playing it as 8th note triplets. That's the first thing you want to kind of master. Don't go too slow, because by halving it from 16th note triplets to 8th note triplets, you're actually helping a lot. So you don't want to have the drum beat so slow that it's unintelligible. You want to push yourself slightly, but make sure that you're in control and you can feel each of those, in this case, 8th note triplets. So very briefly, this tempo would be like this. So I'm at 100 there, 100 BPM, and then doing it as 8th note triplets. You might want to take it down to 90 or 80 or 70, but make sure you can feel each and every one of them. The next thing to do is to just focus solely on the left hand, and this is something I've been working on a lot recently over the last 12 months myself, and that's not even picking or doing anything at all, with the right hand at all, and just focusing intently on each and every subdivision with each digit. And this is kind of brutal at first, and it sounds awful and is messy, you know, lots of overdriven string noise and stuff, but it's great for your timing. So what this might look like is, if you've got a fret wrap, you can control that, by the way. I don't today, so it's going to sound a bit messy, but yeah. And so I've been working on this for quite some time. I'm going to do some more videos on it and show my sort of development and progress with it. But this is a really good idea to work on. So it'd be like this. So you'll hear some notes like popping out louder than the others, you hear some notes quieter than others. The idea is to try and get it uniform. There's some almost impossible bits with the finger roll here, which you just have to ignore. But the point here is that even with all the kind of string noise and things, and the goal is to try and make it as smooth as possible and still feel each subdivision in the left hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. That is incredibly difficult if you've never done it before, but it's something to work on. It really does pay off massively. So with the drum beat, let's see if I can do this. Again, apologise for the string noise, but this is just inevitable about this way of practicing. We're not worrying about that, we can tidy that up later. I'll try and do that actually a bit now with muting. Okay, well, that pretty much covers everything I can think of for practicing and working on this lick. If you've got any questions or you give it a go, do let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed the video, maybe think about hitting the like button and subscribe button. You can check out lessons with me over on my website at davidbeebe.com, the podcast that I host, the Guitar Hour podcast, and also that app that I developed with Tom Quayle, Solo, for working on your fretboard visualization for iOS and Android devices. All those links are in the description below. And until the next video, bye-bye.